Hi everyone, I'm your host John Ivison. This is our weekly video series. I'm joined by Marcella Monroe, who is the owner-operator of WPM Public Affairs, and Andrew Balfour, managing partner of Rubicon Strategies. Now, we've discussed previously our affinity with Malcolm Tucker, the fictional spin doctor, and Marcella, you put yourself in the running for the Malcolm Tucker Award for Excellence in Swearing on Twitter this week, to the chagrin of your mother. Tell us about that.
Don't come for my family. Some jerk was implying when my beautiful mother and stepfather got vaccinated that they were just invoking their elite privilege, of which they have none. So, well, it ticked me off. I was a bit short-tempered, and my mother was appreciative of the concept of what I was trying to say, but didn't like me swearing.
Any more of that, we'll have to put in an effing bleep. So, let's talk conventions. We've got dueling conventions, the NDP and the Liberal Party this week. If the Conservative Party had hoped to get a bump from its convention, it was sorely disappointed when, on the Friday night, Erin O'Toole made a speech moving his party to the centre of the political spectrum, and then the next day he was dragged kicking and screaming back to the fringes by his party base when they had that vote on whether climate change is real. Jagmeet Singh has had something similar, the fighting centrifugal forces in his own party with some of these resolutions. People might know about them, but they're, in essence, somewhat off the wall, many of them. Abolishing the military, pulling down statues of Sir John A. Macdonald, praising Cuba and Venezuela, etc., etc. Let's start with you, Andrew. Do you think that alienates moderate mainstream voters who might otherwise have given the NDP a look?
Well, I mean, I think that's why they had to pull them. They're no longer going to be debated, or at least abolishing the military.
We're not sure what all the resolutions that will make it to the floor, but clearly the leader spoke out about that one in particular.
But that's kind of getting in front of it. I mean, I'm sure that Erin O'Toole wishes that he could have pulled the climate change resolution before it blew up in his face, and I think that that's what the NDP are trying to do right now, is make it so that I think that for both the Liberals and the NDP, that if you can just get out of these conventions without getting mud on your face, that's a win at this point in time.
One of the resolutions was to tax any income over $1 billion at 100%, which clearly would have raised no money and lost the billionaire vote for the NDP. But Marcella, do you think that the parties handled this well and should emerge intact?
Well, I guess it remains to be seen. I think it was smart for Jagmeet Singh, and I think it was probably Anne McGrath, who's very smart about conventions. She's kind of a master at running them, to get him to go out yesterday and make that statement, kind of try to run it off at the pass. But, you know, like the Conservatives, the NDP has a bit of a fringe on its left flank. This isn't the first time, it won't be the last time that they face, these kind of resolutions at their conventions. And, we'll see. I think the advantage the NDP has going into the convention, though, is having seen what happened to the Conservatives when they kind of, assumed they were going to get something done that they actually couldn't get done. And acknowledging that, unlike an in-person convention, they can't be a floor fight, right? It's very, very easy for the central party to control what gets broadcast, what gets debated. So we'll see. But I mean, the Socialist Caucus has always been very active. They love to write resolutions. And, I think there's one about the EDAs that could actually cause more fundamental problems for the NDP, in the sense that, they're trying to get more autonomy from the central party. And that's not really how normal national political parties work anymore. So that could be a bit of a problem for them.
We'll keep an eye out for that. While I was writing about this week, I looked at the opinion polls for the NDP prior to the last election, and in the month before the election was called, they were somewhere around an average of 13% over the course of the month. In the week before the election, they were at 18%. That was solely down, in my opinion, down to Jagmeet Singh's performance. I mean, he lifted them single-handedly by 5 points. Do you think he can make gains this time, Marcella?
I mean, I think it remains to be seen. Look, I think what we've seen from the polling too is that they have a bit of a challenge, or a big challenge in Quebec, where, presumably for the NDP to sort of start to break through that 20% barrier nationally, they need to get back to making some inroads there. I think it's interesting that we have dueling conventions too. So I'll be curious to see what happens as we see, Canadians, especially progressive Canadians, look at both Mr. Singh's performance and the Prime Minister Trudeau's performance this weekend to see if there's any, maybe there's a bigger bump one way or the other than the Conservative convention, because you'll have that contrast. So that's a nice thing for folks like you to be writing about.
Andrew, the Liberal one looks a bit of a snoozer by comparison. I mean, I think Trudeau and his Praetorian Guard have stamped out all possible sources of opposition. Do you expect any fireworks at all?
Well, it doesn't seem to me that there's a lot of opportunities for fireworks, but when you have 4,000 people, you never know what might happen. Things can get sidetracked, but it does sound they have things under control, as a governing party often does going into a convention. I don't think that, they'll get nice news coverage out of Minister Freeland doing her talk with former Prime Minister Martin. They'll get a news bump out of Mark Carney being there and lots of speculation around that. But, I mean, are Canadians really paying attention to this? I don't think so. I mean, I've said this before and I'll say it again. What's this have to do with me getting vaccinated? And also the Masters is on. Come on now.
All right, well, we'll just, should we just cut it off there then? We might as well. Nobody's watching, so.
Boring can be good, right? That's something we know for sure in Canada.
And I made that point earlier. If you can just get out of this without having a horrible moment like Erin O'Toole did, then it's great. Because then you're not making any news and then people won't pay attention. You can just keep moving along.
What about Carney? What are you hearing on Carney?
Is he there to sell books, or is he there to kind of pull a Michael Ignatieff in 06?
I think he's very tempted to do. I think he's very tempted to get involved, frankly. Anyway, we'll see.
Well,
next topic.
There's two ridings in Ottawa that he could easily go after.
We will see. I don't expect news on Friday night, by the way. Erin O'Toole said this week that he would have a public inquiry into Canada's COVID response if he was elected Prime Minister. The Liberals have even said that they would open an inquiry, although presumably that would be of the internal variety that would unearth a great mass of no evidence, certainly of wrongdoing. But the Auditor General, when she looked at this, she said that the pandemic has revealed the need for an independent review to examine and recommend improvements for coordination across jurisdictions when the country faces a major incident. Now, I spoke to somebody who was involved at a senior level in emergency management this week, and he essentially said Canada was completely unprepared. There was no basic plan, even though departments are required to have an emergency plan. They do have one. They filed it with the Government Operations Centre. It was put in the filing cabinet, and nobody looked at it. He said that the federal government, and I think this applies to provincial governments as well, they're okay when they're playing 5-on-5 hockey. But if something happens, they can't handle it. And the major reason for that, we're on the back foot, essentially because the bureaucracy is unaccountable. Marcella, do you think that explains why we, from when it comes to rapid testing, to quarantine hotels, to vaccines, to whatever you care to name, we appear to have been caught flat-footed?
I mean, I wouldn't blame the bureaucracy so much. I think it's successive federal political governments, the politicians kind of dropping the ball on different things, right? We did have a big report after SARS. They knew they had gaps in the system, and then successive governments didn't do anything.
It was in the filing cabinet along with the emergency management.
Yeah, but
Nobody looked at this thing.
I don't know that I think it's fair to blame civil servants. I mean, if you look at, for instance, to your point about provinces, so Alberta, after the flood in Calgary in 2013, went through a big overhaul of their emergency response system. And by the time we had the Fort Mac fire, that system was very well organized and very well run, and, can be credited with why we didn't have, we had 2 deaths, 88,000 people left the city within 24 hours. So, it can be done. You can have a concerted emergency response plan that's actually very much driven by the long-term civil service, but you need the political will. And I think, in Canada, we've had it too good, I think, is part of the problem.
What about you, Andrew? Is it political will or administrative won't?
Well, I mean, On the first part, anyone who says that they wouldn't have a post-mortem on COVID should probably just get out of politics completely. Like, obviously, we're going to be looking through that. I don't know whether we can really point the fingers at the bureaucrats. I mean, they've existed in an environment where they are at the service of their minister's office, and that's the way that, as you aptly pointed out in your column, that is actually the way that our system is designed to function. So I don't know if we can get mad at them for operating in the environment that they're prescribed to do so.
But if there's no consequences, I mean, I agree with the idea of ministerial responsibility as a cornerstone of our whole system. But if you have bureaucracies that don't play nice with other departments, don't play nice with other jurisdictions, are totally risk averse. I mean, I use the kind of turtle analogy. They turtled. They kind of withdrew into their own shells, didn't stick their necks out in case they got chopped off. Somewhere there needs to be an incentive for the public service and for ministers to push them to do this, to make brave decisions. I mean, I guess that immediately makes me think about Yes Minister, and there are brave decisions where you lose votes and courageous decisions where you actually lose elections. But somewhere along the line, we did not do this particularly well, and we've got to do it better next time.
Well, there is within the bureaucracy a system that is supposed to keep that in check, which is pay at risk for senior executives, which is part of their, call it, bonus structure. And that is supposed to incentivize them to do it so that they make sure that they hit their metrics and get their money that also contributes to their pension. But, I mean, aside from that, how can you incentivize a bureaucrat? I don't really.
I still don't think, I mean, you can incentivize them, maybe you should, but I still fundamentally, in a way, think our political leadership, regardless of the stripe of the government, need to be, maybe they need to be told when they get into their briefing books and first get into office, like that should be on everyone's radar. And so, I'm quite willing to believe federally that we could say perhaps the civil service played a role in not forcing that issue, making it really clear that this was an important structure in government. I know when we were government in Alberta, that was made crystal clear to us on day one. So, maybe that's where their responsibility lies. But you can't, I don't think, blame them when stuff gets unfunded, for example, which is, again, what we saw with successive Liberal Conservative governments on this file.
Right. Okay, well, fair enough. Let's spread the blame around and say it's everybody's fault but ours. So anyhow, on that note, have a great weekend. The sun's shining in the east, at least. I'm not sure about the west, but get out, enjoy, and we'll speak again next week.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.